But now we are still trying to figure out our lighting issues, and so we're going to just do a quick podcast with you guys and update you all on what's going on for the month of March. I will be talking about Women's History Month once again. We'll also be discussing Super Tuesday and the results that are coming in fast and furiously, as well as some of the controversy around the Super Tuesday events that have been happening lately. And we'll start with the results right now from Super Tuesday. And it appears that from CNN that Secretary Clinton has won Florida, the presidential primary in Florida, and Donald Trump has won as well on the Republican side. I'm watching the coverage of CNN, and Senator Marco Rubio is about to speak. It was widely reported that it was a must-win state for him today. He is the junior senator from the state of Florida, and if he did not win Florida, it would be highly problematic. I'll be interested to see in his remarks whether or not he drops out of the race. I don't see how he stays in the race if he can't win his home state. But in this presidential race, crazier things have happened. So we shall see about what he says, and we'll keep monitoring it um, as the night progresses. But of course, there are 5 states that have voted today, Florida being one, Ohio, Missouri, Illinois, North Carolina as well. And the main focus has been on Florida and Ohio, but the other races are very interesting, particularly Missouri. Missouri sets up to be a very big night for Senator Bernie Sanders because of the composition of Missouri. Missouri is, of course, the basically right dead back in the middle of the country, and the demographics of Missouri, how it's both conservative, really in the middle of the state, and as you get closer to the western part of the state, but on the western edge and the eastern edge um, are urban centers, Kansas City, Missouri on the western end, as well as St. Louis on the eastern end of the state, and those are their population centers. And so it'll be interesting to see how Missouri shapes up for Senator Sanders. Ohio is looked to be a place where Senator Sanders will be able to um, maybe mimic what happened last week in Michigan. Remember, we were talking about Michigan last week, and to see whether or not he was going to eke out a win. I predicted that it may happen in Michigan because of the demographics in Michigan are not quite what people think when they think about Michigan. Most people just think about Detroit, but Michigan is much larger than Detroit, and so he actually did eke out a win. That is being Senator Sanders, and he's looking to do the same thing in Ohio as well as in Illinois, Ohio's neighbor and Michigan's neighbor, all of whom have dealt with the issues of trade. All 3 of these states are very highly impacted by the car industry and how some of the jobs have been shipped overseas. Also with manufacturing, steel on the eastern side of Ohio, but it's very what they call the Rust Belt states. And so, and it's going to be very interesting to see how Senator Sanders' campaign is able to get some votes in Ohio and Illinois and see if they can mimic what happened in Michigan last week. I am monitoring, and CNN is not so much talking about it, but I'm very interested to see what happens in Illinois, particularly because the race for the state attorney for Cook County is also happening today, along with the presidential primary. And as you know, the atrocity that was the shooting death of Laquan McDonald happened in Cook County, and many people were calling for the resignation of Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel, as well as the resignation of Ms. Alvarez, who is the district attorney, or what they call the state's attorney for Cook County, Anita Alvarez. Well, currently she's running for re-election today in their primary. And so it'll be very interesting to see whether or not she wins. There is a Black woman who is running against her, and I think there was another person that's also running against her for the seat. So I'm interested to see how these results are coming in, as the Ohio polls, I believe, have just closed at the top of the hour. Excuse me, the Illinois polls have closed, I believe, at the top of the hour. The background of all of this, particularly with what happened in Illinois with Donald Trump's campaign, as well as allegedly with Senator Sanders' campaign, really kind of underscores what we were talking about last week. The fact that many in Donald Trump's campaign have been spewing a racist rhetoric across the country in his different events, in and outside of his events. Young protesters have been beaten up, have been had some unkind remarks hurled at them, racist remarks hurled at them. But then everything kind of exploded when Donald Trump brought his campaign to Chicago last weekend. After a lot of conversations, I really think that him bringing his campaign to Chicago was almost like a setup, because there's not really many people in Chicago that really would vote for him. Chicago itself is a very Democratic stronghold, which is why the Democratic primary for state's attorneys today is basically going to set up what happens in November. There are so many different places that Donald Trump could rally outside of the city of Chicago. So bringing his foolishness into the city of Chicago, with already a hotbed in Chicago, with everything that has been going on in that city for years, and particularly around the Laquan McDonald issues around trying to advocate against their mayor. It was basically a recipe for a disaster. And I think that he capitalized on that and caused a lot of unnecessary harm. A lot of people could have gotten hurt. A lot of people could have gotten seriously hurt. People did get hurt during that, which happened, I believe, last Friday or last Saturday. So it's really just a mess. I do think that the southern 2/3 of Illinois that's outside of Chicago will turn the tide for Donald Trump. I believe that Illinois, just like Indiana, is more conservative than people want to give it credit for. Illinois, really south of Chicago, west of Chicago, is very conservative. The western suburbs of Chicago are more wealthy, but it's also very rural in the southern kind of half of Chicago, or excuse me, of Illinois. So I'm interested to see what happens with that. But I'm more so concerned about recently members of the GOP who are running for president have now come out to say how bad Donald Trump's rhetoric has been, how bad he's invoking passions of his supporters, invoking them to be violent, and how he needs to tamp them down. But he has been doing this all along. This is not something new. And people have been sending around videos to really lay this out, that he has been egging his folks on to hit, to abuse, to speak harshly to people who are peacefully protesting his existence, his running for president. A lot of the protesters that I have seen attending Donald Trump's rallies are literally just standing there. They are standing there. Some are chanting, but many of them have just been standing there, and some law enforcement entity has escorted them out. And then, of course, you have the incident where a young man was being escorted out and was sucker punched in the face, and then he was put face down and I believe arrested, or minimum, it looks like he was handcuffed before he was removed uh, from um, from the venue that the Donald Trump rally. So all of it is just quite disturbing to me, and I really hope that um, that I re- obviously Donald Trump is not going to remove himself from this race. And so something's going to have to be had either by Secret Service, who is there to protect him, but also has a duty to uphold the Constitution and the laws around the United States. And so I would hope that the Department of the Treasury and whomever is over the Secret Service would be able to figure out a way for them to walk this line of protecting the presidential candidates, as well as ensuring that people who are attending the rallies, whether in support or in protest to Donald Trump or any other candidate for that matter, are treated fairly, humanely, and if they are called to be removed from a venue, that they can be removed without unnecessary harm to be had by the protester. Um, it's problematic to say the least, and I just hope that um, someone is ensuring that a full scale review of the Secret Service and their handling of these Donald Trump rallies will be taking place. Of course, the Department of the Treasury is the entity at last count that is over the Secret Service. And so hopefully Secretary Lew or somebody who it may not go all the way up to the secretary's office, but someone who's over um, the Secret Service will be doing something to correct what is happening there. Um, so that's it right now for the election. We're still waiting for the results to come in. I'm trying to figure out whether or not Marco is saying that he's going to drop out of this race. He's given a speech in his hometown of Miami. His wife and his children are there with him. Nothing has come across just yet, um, but we shall see. I feel it should be imminent. He may want to wait until tomorrow. I doubt it. It seems like it. There it is. And Rubio is dropping out of the race. He is suspending his campaign for president, which I expected to happen. I don't see. There would be no way for him to be able to continue with his presidential race, and he cannot win his home state. He has won maybe a couple of races. He won Puerto Rico over the weekend, and I believe that he won the DC um, presidential primary race over the weekend as well. But that does not a presidential race make. And so he has bowed out of the race. And now it is down to the final three, which is Kasich, Trump, and Cruz. And I suspect in the next coming days that Donald Trump will turn up the heat on Governor Kasich and try to get him out before too long. So it's just Trump and Cruz. And keep in mind that Trump and Cruz were best friends before they became enemies. And like what happened with Ben Carson, I think they're going to be best friends once again, should this come down to the final two of them. So I am very interested to see how this will shape up in the next couple of weeks. It is also interesting to note what will happen to Marco Rubio, because Marco Rubio's term in the Senate is up. I don't believe that he has the ability to be back on the ballot to return to the Senate. So Marco's going to have to find him something to do come January 2017. So that is what the race is for now. And we can kind of turn to Women's History Month. As I told you all last week, I was reading a new book called The Warmth of the Other Suns. which is by an African American woman named Isabel Wilkerson. It's a phenomenal book. I hope that you guys pick it up. You can get it at Barnes and Noble. You can get it on Amazon. I don't think that it's on Audible because it is a very lengthy book, but it is fantastic read thus far. I've been able to, it's about 600 pages, and I'm about 100 pages in right now, but it's really talking about the Great Migration and through the stories of three individuals, one from Mississippi, one from Louisiana, and one from Florida. And the Florida story that is just beginning is particularly interesting because it really well, all of the stories really do this, but this one in particular really talks about the horrors that happened to African Americans in Florida. Not too much conversation do I remember of people talking about the impact of racial discrimination, racial terrorism in the state of Florida, and how the state of Florida entered the union, and the things that were done to Black people and other people of color in the state of Florida. One in particular story that I am just so troubled by is the story of Claude Neal. And Claude Neal was an African American young man, and he was accused of killing a white young lady that they used to live across the street from his home. And Ms. Wilkerson tells the story about how, and sorry about that, you guys. Tells the story. I have a lot of rambunctious kids here outside of my door. Tells the story about how Mr. Neal was chased across county lines, across state lines, because a mob was trying to apprehend him after he was already in the custody of the local sheriff's department. They finally were able to get him, and they tortured him. They tortured him for hours. They castrated him, and they placed his castrated members and made him eat them, and asked him if he liked it. Then they hanged him. They set him on fire, I believe, after he was dead, and then brought his body back to the place in which the young lady used to live with her parents, which happened to be across the street again from where he lived. And her father was enraged that they did this prior to nightfall. They were telling everybody that they would wait until nightfall for them to actually kill him so that the mob could come after work and watch him being killed. They did not do that. And so her father was angry because he wanted to get the first shot off and shoot him himself. And so yeah, I think that they did more mutilation to him. I think they hanged him again in the town so that everybody else could see him being hanged. It was just a travesty of just epic proportions. In the end, this is one of many cases where people have just been brutalized, and the stories of these people have not been told adequately, to my estimation. And again, I'm only 100 pages into a 600-page book talking about why Black people were forced to leave the South in hopes that there would be a better life waiting for them in the North that they had heard so much about. It's a fascinating read. I encourage you to pick it up. I encourage you to read it, and tell us what you think. Always tweet us at Say What K Crane, or email us at saywhatcrane@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of the book. I'm going to put that book up and other books that I'm beginning to read on my website, KeilaCrane.com, so that you can see, and let's dialogue about these types of things. Outside of just Black History Month is to illuminate what happened within Black history throughout the year. So let's talk about some of these things that you're reading, and let's dialogue with them together. And also within Black History Month, of course, as you all know, or may know from my bio, that I'm a lawyer, and one of the great people that I would like to lift up for Women's History Month is a Black woman named Juanita Jackson Mitchell. And Juanita Jackson Mitchell is a native of Baltimore. She was a native of Baltimore, and she was the first African American woman to be barred in the state of Maryland. Um, in Maryland, everyone who is barred has to sign their name into a book. And so you have people like Thurgood Marshall who have signed this book, people like the former Chief Justice Robert M. Bell of the Maryland Court of Appeals, the highest court in the state of Maryland, have signed this book. Anybody and everybody who is a barred attorney within the state of Maryland has signed this book. And Juanita Jackson Mitchell, including myself, and Juanita Jackson Mitchell, as the first African American woman barred attorney, signed this book as well, which is just so profound. But Miss Jackson Mitchell worked as a lawyer with the Baltimore branch of the NAACP, trying to fight injustices. She went down to Scottsboro and in Alabama and worked with those young men who were wrongfully accused of rape in that case, and trying to advocate on behalf of them. She also worked to desegregate houses here in Baltimore, as well as educational facilities here in Baltimore. And she was married to Clarence Mitchell, who many regard as the 101st senator for his advocacy work with the NAACP's Washington Bureau. Something very important to me. I started my advocacy with the NAACP as well in South Carolina at my college, and she was the one that helped put together the NAACP's Youth and College Division. And so for no other reason, I'm indebted to her, not only for the trails that she blazed as a lawyer here in Maryland, but also for her deciding that she wanted to create a entity for young people to learn the tools of advocacy and how to advocate not only in their cities, but also on their college campuses through the Youth and College Division, to build up a militant group of young people who would fight injustice. And so Juanita Jackson Mitchell was a profound woman in her own right, doing the work. And not many people know about the work that she was so fortunate to do in her life through her legal career, through her other advocacy means, and through her work with the Baltimore branch of the NAACP. She helped actually, and so I just want to lift her up, and hopefully you'll be able to go on the Googles and learn more about her and other Black women who were able to blaze trails in their own right, either through a legal process or other means to fight for justice and equality. Not enough has really been written about them. I just really hope that we can use this month of March to highlight them. It is kind of interesting, just as an aside note, that we don't really take the time to build up Women's History Month like we do Black History Month. I don't really see a lot of hashtags about Women's History Month as I did about Black History Month. I don't see a lot of corporations and things like that doing a lot of things around Women's History Month every single day like I did Black History Month. I definitely want that to continue with Black History Month, but I also want it to continue with women, because the contributions of women in America and across the country, across the world, sometimes go under noticed. And we as women have made a remarkable impact upon our society, our global society, and in particular, our American society. And I really hope that we can ensure that our contributions are really etched in the annals of history, or herstory, as it were. And so I hope that during the rest of the other 16 days that are left in Women's History Month, that you learn about women and their contribution on America. And I'm going to go back to really quickly the races that are being fought today. All of the polls have closed, I believe, now, and we're waiting to see how they turn in. With 3% in Illinois, Secretary Clinton holds about a 10-point lead over Senator Sanders. CNN has already called for Clinton, Florida, and North Carolina. And so we have 4 more races to go to see how those turn out for either Secretary Clinton or for Senator Sanders. On the Republican side, it looks like it is going to be a pretty much clean sweep. The only one that Donald Trump does not look like he's going to win is the state of Ohio. The governor of Ohio, Mr. Kasich, is the one that looks like will win his home state. So eh, I don't know how the Republicans are going to try to stop Donald Trump. It looks like it's going to go all the way to the convention. And then you got to figure out how you're either going to strip him of something that he's earned or put some pieces of this puzzle together and stop him that way. Um, However they do it, Godspeed to them for that, because I don't see how they're going to win regardless, the presidency at this rate with all of the craziness that has happened with the GOP during this presidential race biennial. So I hope that this has been it's been a short episode today because we're trying to still figure out what is going on with this race. Um, the past couple of weeks we've been able to kind of figure out exactly what happened um, before our broadcast was over. And so definitely follow up about the warmth of other suns. Let's chat on Facebook. I'll be up for a while and talking on Twitter. So definitely follow me. Say what Kay Crane, so we can talk about these races. And then go to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Say What Crane. Let us know what you want to talk about, whether it's politics, entertainment, or a combination of the both. We'll definitely talk about it on our next show. And hopefully we can get this lighting fixed so that we can see each other on Say What Now. So if you guys have any questions, you can definitely leave it in our Q&A, or if you go to our event page on Google Hangout, or excuse me, on Google Plus, you can drop some questions there as well. So thank you guys for listening today on a podcast version of Say What Now, and have a great night.